Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. That's right. Brandon, what were you doing? You're reaching for something real quick. Last minute. You didn't realize it was about to be on the air. We are on the air, off field, missing our fearless leader, Liv Moods, out. She's on the road. Wednesday is going to be me and you, BK, right? Going forward, Liv will be here Monday, Friday, obviously. But Wednesday, BK, you and I are going to be rocking this thing.
Yeah, and there's plenty to talk about, obviously, because today is the day the Broncos get back on the field. And I'm curious, I want to start with something that, you know, the Broncos will send out the schedule as soon as they know it, but coaches will change stuff on the media side, right? So they'll say, hey, practice is now this. And so they will then send out to members of the press, this is when practice is, this is when practice ends. So press conferences, locker rooms start at this time. And it's been the same time most of last year and through the first 4 weeks of this year, including in West Virginia. The times were still about the same. Every now and then we'll hear about a 15-minute kind of slide one way or another. Today, it's a full hour later, and it is that way the rest of the week. And so I just hadn't taken the time yet to ask around about it. But what do you think goes into starting practice an hour later? Because they're not playing a night game. They're playing a 2:05 kick, but they're going to start practice an hour later, end it obviously an hour later. What's the thought process there? Because there obviously is a reason. They don't just do stuff to do stuff in the NFL.
Yeah, I think Sean Payton, there's a couple of reasons. I think they're tired, man. I think they're tired from that week, and I think it took it all out of them. And I think they just trying to catch up on sleep and get reacclimated to the time zone. I know Sean Payton's he's a night guy, right? He's a night owl. He's often there late and then doesn't show. He's not the first in the building, put it that way. And so maybe Sean Payton needs to kind of get himself acclimated to the mountain time again after 10 days on the East Coast and in the Greenbrier and what they went through and getting a couple of road victories. But I think it might just be, trying to respond to the needs of the team after an unprecedented sort of 10-day trip.
Yeah, and I guess we'll find out next week, and we may know even ahead of time, right? If somebody asks or if we hear and they know, in the behind the scenes world of the Broncos, if next week is going back to normal, then we'll know that it's exactly that. If this becomes the norm, then have they just shifted their days around? And you're right, Sean isn't going to tell anyone, and no one claims that he's the first in the building. He can be the last one to leave sometimes because he is a night owl. And that's why training camp practices are when they are. There's not a lot of meetings before they get going in the mornings for training camp. And so I think that you're right. It could be as simple as, let's just get our body clocks readjusted. They've got 2 back-to-back Sunday games at home, 2:05, and then the short week with the trip to New Orleans. So we know that that's always a wonky week with how teams handle their practice schedule. So it was just interesting when, you get the email. It's like, okay, practice is an hour later across the board all week. So, okay.
It's also one of those things too. If they end up whooping up on the Raiders, expect this practice schedule to stay. You know what I mean? It's like, this is working for us. Coaches are pretty superstitious. If you stumble upon a kind of a schedule that ends up paying dividends and you put in a good performance, well, expect it to be the way going forward. But they got 2 AFC West opponents in a row here, and after starting 3 of the first 4 games on the road, which none of these other AFC West teams would do. Everyone else so far has had 2 at home, 2 on the road. The Broncos 3 on the road have been able to win 2 of those. So they're coming in at home to reestablish, Brandon, the home field advantage that used to exist for the Broncos. Before we get into this matchup with the Raiders and talk about how the Broncos are going to beat the Raiders, what do you think has accounted for losing what was always the best home field advantage in the NFL that the Broncos always had?
Well, Peyton Manning retired, I guess, is part of it.
But we had it. We didn't have Peyton.
Well, look, they right. Y'all won plenty of games when it was
had it.
Snake. Yeah. And so it's not just Peyton, but I think that is a big part, right? Quarterback play in the last 8 years just hasn't been great, and it hasn't been consistent. And Sean Payton likes to reference things that happen in New Orleans, understandably, when you're there 15 years, 16 years. But one thing he does talk about is their home record at the Dome all those years was really good. He goes, but our road record was good too because they just had good teams. And when you have good teams, your home record is going to be good. And here with the altitude, it is the elevation. It is even more of an advantage. But I think it's just that their teams haven't been great. And so it's as simple as as it's not that, that difficult a place to play as it once was. What's funny though, you talk about teams having home field advantage, and I haven't seen who the two Chargers home games are. I just don't have it off the top of my head, but I know that just hearing it last week and then going back and watching some of it, the Raiders, like they are for almost every home game, even though they're a regional team. And that growing up in the Bay Area, how many Raiders fans there were, even when they were in LA, that just stuck with the team. Then they came back. Now they're in Vegas. Some people stuck with the team. Some people haven't. It can be a 50-50 kind of crowd. It certainly has been for the last couple of Broncos games that I was at in Vegas. And last week with the Browns and our pal Shelby Harris, it was a pro Browns crowd, or a very vocal Browns crowd. So, but you're right. The schedule has been a little strange, but I think it'll play out in the Broncos' advantage down the road, because it feels like they do have a stronger schedule in terms of home and road, minus November 3rd in Baltimore, November 10th in KC. That's a tough 2-week stretch. But in general, to survive these 4 first games with 3 of them being on the road and get 2 wins out of it, I think is a good place to be. Do you have a thought as to why they don't have the home field advantage they once did?
It's Vegas, baby. I mean, it's people. Oh, Denver. Oh, yeah, my bad. You got me thinking about Vegas and also SoFi. These two brand new, beautiful, state-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar stadiums where you don't have a home field advantage anymore. And as you were talking, I was thinking about Davante Adams and how disenchanted he is in Vegas, right? And you got to think about where he came from, Green Bay, which is one of the best home field advantages that exists. You go into Lambeau Field, you're not going to see a lot of opposition there. You know why? Because no one's going to fucking Green Bay on a vacation. They got the Bellagio isn't in Green Bay. The Wynn,
all everything else that comes with Vegas beyond the Bellagio. You're right. They don't have any of that in Green Bay.
Nobody's going on a vacation to Wisconsin, and so the home field advantage and the atmosphere for playing football and having that be your number one thing, probably much more satisfying for a player, even though you are sort of in the middle of nowhere. If, like Davante Adams, what you want to do is be the best in the world at what you do and win championships, then maybe the writing is on the wall in Vegas, and you realize that you're not going to have a fucking chance to focus on football, make football the only thing in a town like that when you go show up on game day and half the crowd is there to support the other team. LA is the same way. SoFi, not a home field advantage either. I mean, the Niners played down there and lost a really good game to the Rams, but the 49ers call SoFi Stadium Levi South, because of the home field advantage they get there. You look around, it's a sea of red. So that's an advantage for the Broncos, having 2 of their divisional opponents not even have a home field crowd. So when they go on the road, the Broncos fans are going to travel with them. But to your question and my original question to you about the home field advantage here, yeah, the teams aren't good, man. The teams aren't good. And so when the teams aren't good, the altitude or elevation, as you correctly stated it, isn't a factor, because the margin that gives you an advantage is rubbed out by the fact that the other team is better than you. And you know what? The Denver Broncos, I think it's specifically to the offense. The offense has been the problem ever since Peyton left, like you said. And they haven't been able to put up points. And they haven't been able to put up points in the first half, on the first drive, like they did a couple weeks ago in Tampa. I think really that's the key to having the home field advantage, is scoring points early and getting the crowd into it. And then having the crowd be able to lean on these opposing offenses and make it hard for them to operate. I've been in that building. It's not a building. I've been in that stadium when it's incredibly loud. It used to be really, really loud. I'm sure you remember those days, right? The Peyton Manning era, the Tebow era, and then, the Shanahan era. We had a great home field advantage. We came out and we always knew we were going to win at home because the crowd was on our side. We were in better shape because of the elevation, and our teams were good. And our offenses always came out of the gate hot. And so I think the Broncos are going to have to find a way to have their offense do the exact same thing, or they're going to be in trouble. I know we're like, oh, it's the Raiders. They're in shambles. Antonio Pierce, Davante Adams wants out. We've been saying this for years, Brandon. And when's the last time the Broncos have beaten the Raiders?
It's been 8 games, and I think it might even be 9 of 10. So it's been 8 in a row and 9 of 10. And real quick, final point on just the home field advantage here. The one place you're going to get an advantage, pick a sport, hockey, basketball, maybe less so in baseball, should be, and certainly in football, should be in the first quarter, because teams always try to guess how the elevation is going to affect their team. A coaching staff will look at it and say, we're going to fly to Denver on Friday so they can get used to just being a mile above sea level, or we're going to fly in as late as possible and get there Saturday night at 6, 7 o'clock, dinner, short meeting, and let's go to bed and just get over and go to the stadium. But regardless, it's still a different level, no matter how hard you get going in the pregame warm up and workout that you'll do, it's not going to be anywhere near the level of intensity of a game. So I think that that's where the Broncos certainly of late just haven't taken advantage is because they've struggled out of the gate in the first quarter, home and road. But if what they script, and we know Mike Shanahan was as good as anyone, but if what they script is working early, and the same with Coobs too, then we know Sean Payton certainly has that club in his bag to script it. We saw it in Tampa, obviously, that it can not only keep the crowd in it, but completely take the wind out of the sails of the visiting team, if you will.
Yeah, and the Broncos in Tampa took the ball, won the toss, took the ball. Let's get the ball. Let's get the ball down the field, score early. And Sean Payton typically is a guy who defers to the second half when he wins the kick. And I'm interested in Sean Payton kind of switching that up and taking the ball going forward. And here, I know that he likes to try to tilt the game, call the game in the first half in a way that leaves him with the ball at the end of the first half, so he can score at the end of the first half and then get the ball back at the beginning of the second half. And he kind of thinks that steals a possession. And so a lot of times offensive coaches want to do that because they can call the game, particularly in the second half of the second quarter, in a way that leaves them with the ball last. And then they get it first in the second half. But I also think that you can do that by taking the ball in the first half, and then trying to call the game in a way that leaves you with the ball at the end of the first half, which steals a possession anyway, right? If you have possession at the beginning of the game and at the end of the first half, then you have one more possession than your opponents in that first half. So you steal a possession that way, and then maybe you can do it in the second half as well. But anyway, as an offensive player, I like it when the coach says we're going to take the ball, we're going to go down and score. And they did it in Tampa. A thing about the altitude or the elevation, I remember going down and playing in Florida and feeling like I was could run forever. I was not tired. I was not tired. And also I didn't have to go pee because it just out your pores because you're sweating. But at the same time, I just felt so good there. And it looked like the Broncos did too, a couple weeks ago. And so you wonder if the elevation or altitude is actually more effective when you travel because you're in better shape than everyone when you go down to sea level than it is maybe when they come here.
You would think that it would, and like you said, in Tampa, it's a great place. And look, they played at sea level all 3 weeks. Their next road game is below sea level, right? As we know, going back to the tragedy around Hurricane Katrina, but learning all about the floodplains and everything there in the Big Easy. So they'll be below. So that should help them even more with the drastic shift in terms of the elevation. But it's funny because you say that, and look, I don't want to pretend like playing pickup basketball and or drinking recreationally are anywhere close to being an NFL player. But when I was younger, and I moved here in my late 20s, I've been here almost 20 years now, but I moved here in my late 20s and I was playing plenty of pickup basketball. It's like when I would go back to New York and visit friends or be on the West Coast visiting friends in LA, I would think that I could run for days playing pickup hoops. And then I realized I just don't run that hard. I just don't have that game. I'm like, I want to play 3-point line to 3-point line, and maybe if there's a layup to be had, but I'm not going to be Reggie Miller or Steph Curry running through screens and getting open all day and all that. So that was a realization. And also like, I live a mile above sea level, so I can just have a few more drinks because of how much I'm used to drinking. But then I had so many more, like I would miss the line of like, now I'm where I normally am to, I should have had 14 drinks. That was too many.
14. Yeah, maybe one too many.
They can be long nights. They can be long nights. Plus shots. Do shots even count as real drinks?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They definitely do. Depends on how big they are, but shots do count as drinks. All right, let's shift gears into this matchup a little bit. You sent me something before the show started, and it was the quarterback power ranking in the NFL through 4 games, and our boy Bo Nix, 32nd. Out of 32, I imagine, or maybe there's a couple other quarterbacks who got ranked in there, or was he just dead last?
Yeah, I think I saw it at dead last. I was scrolling through it, and then we were hopping on the show, but that was from the 33rd team, and I'm not sure who else was the 33rd team these days, but it was started by a bunch of,
I think, Kurt Warner,
former NFL execs. So, and that's who's basically the brain trust at the top of it. So it's guys like Mike Tannenbaum and people like that. So it's not just, big guys football fans who understand the game. These guys have worked in it. And the fact that Bo Nix is ranked 32nd out of presumably 32, it got me thinking, like, we're looking at Bo Nix differently than everybody else. And I saw a week ago, John Gruden was on Dan Patrick and said of the rookie quarterbacks, he likes Bo Nix the most based on what he had done. And that's before Daniels did one more crazy week of awesome offense and scoring on every possession or just about in Arizona or whatever it was. And so I think you'd be hard pressed to not take Jaden Daniels at the top of the 3 rookie QBs list. But the idea that just we're looking to see little things from Bo, and quarterback play has been so inconsistent, and you were so disappointed by the lack of Russell Wilson, vintage Russell Wilson play that we thought we'd be getting when he was coming from Seattle, that any little thing like, oh, he's running for a first down, touchdown pass, the pass that you featured Monday in the game-changing play, the deep in cut to Cortland to keep that drive alive, that was as good a throw as he's probably made in the pros to this point. So we're just looking for these little morsels. But then if you are going to compare him to the rest of the league, I don't have a big argument to say, well, he threw for 60 yards and was -7 in the first half. And he's not like throwing lasers, or even, you talk about the Broncos and Raiders. I think it was maybe the last time the Broncos won at home, but Derek Carr was here and he was like 29 of 32, but for like 180 yards, because they were all just like, he didn't want Von Miller and Bradley Chubb anywhere near him, so he was just flipping it out as quickly as he could, and they were all 3-yard outs or whatever they were, little check downs. But it didn't matter. They didn't impact the game at all. They were still having to punt a lot, and the Broncos won that game. He's not even doing that, though, right? He's not 29 of 32 for 180 yards. He's 12 of 25 for 60 yards. So I don't have an argument. I can't sit here and say, oh, he's playing better than so-and-so, even if you kind of like what the Broncos are doing with him and how they're trying to bring him along, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking at his statistics here. Not great. Not great. He's got 660 yards in 4 games, 165 yards per game. He's got 1 touchdown, which he had last week, the first of the season, and he's got 4 picks. So you just look at that right there, 60% completion percentage, and it's not great. It's not. Can we throw that up on the screen again there, Jesse? Liv saying, on an airplane, miss my friends. Liv, we miss you too. That's pretty cool that you can hook up to off field on the airplane. What airline you flying? Is the Wi-Fi reliable? Do you want to hop on? Do you want to hop on from your seat?
That would be amazing.
Tell us
I wonder if that's frowned upon. They're like, please, if you're watching or listening to anything, use your headphones, right? They always ask you that. Well, what's the rule on being on a show in the middle of a flight?
Yeah. Well, she pays for the Wi-Fi every single time. Well, then jump on the show and prove it, Liv. Prove it. All right. Sherry Carter saying, I think that ball was slippery. Can you throw that up there, Jesse? I think that ball was slippery on another level. Give him a pass. I actually do give him a pass. And I'm going to have Jake Plummer on Dumb Jock tomorrow to kind of break down his performance. Again, I think bringing Jake on from time to time to talk about Bo. I think Jake has a perspective on quarterbacks that, a lot of us are missing when we just look at the stats there. The stats aren't great. 660 yards, 60% completion, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. But I was talking to Jake on the phone yesterday, and he was saying a lot of these misses that Bo is making are good misses. He's intentionally not putting it in harm's way. He's throwing the ball, and it's either my guy gets it or no one does. And so you live to fight another day type of thing. And so Bo has been, other than those 4 picks, which, look, he's on pace for 17 picks. That's not the worst thing in the world. That's not the one. Peyton Manning famously has 28. He's not, Anthony Richardson has 6 picks. Will Levis has 6 picks. But Geno Smith, who's number 1, in yardage in the league right now, has 4 interceptions. Jared Goff has 4 interceptions. Jalen Hurts has 4. Patrick Mahomes, Golden Boy, has 5. Patrick Mahomes has 5 interceptions.
I know it. I've got him in one fantasy team, and he's just not getting going yet. And it's like,
6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Yeah. Not, and so here's the thing. Patrick Mahomes, is he still the best player in the world?
Yes.
Okay, so he's the best player in the world, and he's near the top of the league in interceptions, and really not even in the top 10 in yardage. So there's things that happen in the beginning of a season where you're trying to get things figured out. We've seen Patrick do it when it matters most, and Bo Nix is getting his feet wet here. And so, I say that to kind of shift gears to the opposition here and the quarterback the Broncos are going to face, and that's Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions thus far through 4 games. He's 877 yards, 219 per game, 70.7 completion percentage. So he's completing a lot of his passes, but they're 2-2 as well. They beat the Browns and they beat the Ravens on the road. That was a very impressive road win.
That knocked so many people out of those survivor pools, including me in a bunch.
Yeah. But guess what else? Though? Minshew been sacked 13 times. 13 times to our boy Bo's 4. Bo has only been sacked 4 times. In fact, Jordan Love's only been sacked 2, but he's only played 3 games. Andy Dalton's sacked 2. He's only played 1 game. Everyone else has been sacked a whole lot more than Bo. Yeah,
they're first in the league. The Broncos are number 1. The offense is not good in so many categories, right? By all your average metrics. Every week when they send out the game release, and you just look at it on your computer because you might print out in black and white, but on your computer, or if you print out in color, it has they're in the green if you're in the top 10. They're in the bluish black. I guess it's more kind of black with the words in blue. If you're in the middle 10, and if you're in the bottom, bottom 10 to 12, I guess. I don't know where that middle cutoff is. It's in red. And their offense has a whole lot of red. 27th in yards per game, 29th in yards per play, 28th in points per game, 20th in rushing yards, 27th in passing yards, 22nd in interceptions, 23rd in fumbles lost, 28th in giveaways, but first in sacks allowed. They're next to last in third down, and their red zone is also 31st. So conversely, the defense is top 5 in just about every category, and we can get into that in a little bit, but at least they're not getting sacked. So you got, when you're looking for silver linings, it's something to hang your hat on for now. Can we go back real quick though, before we get more into Minshew? I just want to ask about Bo Nix's throws being bad misses. And because I was going to ask Sean this question Monday, I didn't, and I kind of asked him today. We talked about it a little on Monday when it looks like he's just off the mark. The one short to Dulcich, the one where he's kind of sailing guys, even the throw, the touchdown to Cortland. Do we think, not the touchdown to Cortland, but do we think some of it is that he's putting it where either his guy can get it or nobody can get it, that his placement's that good? Because my question was also more like when you talk to a kicker, you don't need to tell a kicker, hey, make it, right? Like they know they missed it. They should have made it. Do you talk to a quarterback? And that's, I guess we did talk about it a little, but with Jake saying they're good misses, do I need to reframe how I asked that question today? Or ask, are they good misses or are they just off the mark? And, how do you coach that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And I think that, these guys, these quarterbacks under Sean Payton, and we watched during training camp, that they would come out and consistently, all 3 of them would kind of look exactly the same, right? Taking the same passes, taking the same chances or lack of chances, hitting the same first read guy who's open underneath, and if nothing's there, kind of getting out of the pocket or ditching the ball. These guys it's been drilled into their head to not make errors, to not make the fatal mistake. And so even though Bo has had a couple interceptions that were bad throws, and most of them were because he was pressured and threw off his back foot or did something silly, he is being drilled every day to not make the critical error and to miss in a way that, it's either your guy gets it or no one does. He's not a real 50-50 ball guy yet. And a lot of that is because he doesn't know who to trust, which ones of his receivers are going to grab those 50-50 balls, or if, who's going to fight for it. So a lot of it, I think, is a lack of familiarity with the system that Sean Payton's put in, but a lack of familiarity with his teammates and where Greg Dulcich likes the ball and what his strengths are when the ball's in the air. Is he going to attack the ball? Does he know how to body out a defender, post him up like Antonio Gates used to do, and he could just be open no matter where you throw him open, right? I don't think Bo Nix has learned how to throw open his teammates yet because he doesn't know the tendencies of his teammates, and I think that'll come as he gets older. Jake, no stranger to quarterback play, to criticism about his quarterback play. He was a player who did take a lot of chances, who wasn't afraid to throw an interception when he was trying to make a play. And he learned a lot about, the good throws, the bad ones, the good misses, and the bad ones. And so I don't think Jake is just blowing smoke up our asses when he talks about Bo Nix's play being good. I think he means it sincerely, and he knows what it takes to win in the NFL. And Bo Nix did find a way to win on the road in New York against, first ballot Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers, who didn't put up a single touchdown. So, and I just dropped him off my fantasy team because of that. And Aaron Rodgers,
who'd you pick up? I guess, and how deep is the league that you're like,
Gino
Rodgers? Okay,
Gino.
all right.
And Sam Darnold. We picked them both up.
Oh,
in fact,
Darnold,
my buddy Rhino, who I'm partners with in this league, actually just texted me. He's watching the show and asked me whose clothes were in the background. They're my wife's clothes, Ryan. I'm in my wife's closet here, and it's got really good natural light.
Good audio.
What's that?
Good acoustics.
Is it bad?
No, it's good. Your acoustics are good.
Well, I got an actual microphone, right?
No, I'm just saying in general. Like, you can be in some rooms that are all glass and it sounds like garbage. So no, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. So yeah, man, I think that that Bo will continue to improve. He will start to understand his players better, and he will throw more catchable balls, and he will start to take throw balls that he believes his guys are going to get and the other guy isn't. But I think as he starts to learn who these guys are, he's less prone to take chances and throw balls that could be anybody's.
Well, and I think about the one miss on the go route to Troy Franklin. That's the one that you'd think, oh, these guys have done this, in terms of muscle memory and just reps more than any combo that he could possibly have is hitting Troy Franklin down the field on a vertical route. But that's where you do have to talk about the weather. And yesterday, Aaron Rodgers on Pat McAfee's show had no problem saying the weather definitely affected both. Like McAfee was bashing the game because he's like, it was hard to watch and the weather and all that. And he was right. But Aaron's like, yeah, he's like, that can be New York weather, whatever. But Aaron certainly was saying the weather was a factor. And so while people were getting on Bo Nix and the Broncos were talking about the weather, but then crediting the Broncos defense, well, look, the Jets defense played really, really well. But when the Broncos did have their chances, the weather clearly at least played a minor role. Okay, so let's jump back to the Raiders and Gardner Minshew, who
Whoa!
Hey, look who that is from the plane. I don't know how long we're gonna get her
Wow.
though. That's exciting.
Yeah. You want to tell us how things are going out there on the plane? Are you stuck on the tarmac?
Yeah, we're gonna take off soon.
Okay. Well, are you worried that everyone's listening to you right now?
No.
All right. Do you want to chime in or anything we're saying here? Giving you any thoughts or ideas about this matchup, or Bo or Gardner or any of it?
Well, I will say this before I hop off, that I did place that bet for the Broncos to win both the home and the road game against the Raiders this season.
Wow. So
Okay.
they're going to break that streak because I think they've lost 8 straight to the Raiders. Yeah.
Here's to hoping. But that is the bet that I placed early when I was, really high on Bo Nix and the Broncos and all that. So.
Hey, I'd like that because I bet the 5.5 up to 6.5, and so every win that we can add to their total is good for me to see the Broncos win. So, and look, no Devontae Adams now. November 24th, it feels almost like a certainty there will be no Devontae Adams, and that takes their best player away. They let Josh Jacobs walk. Now Max Crosby / Christian Wilkins are absolutely their best players, but they can't affect what goes on offense. And even though Gardner Minshew is a gamer, you're worried about Brock Bowers? Is Zamir White keeping you up at night? Vance Joseph has slowed down the best quarterback, the guy with the best resume this side of Patrick Mahomes, but he still has 4 MVPs. Last week held him to no touchdowns. Baker Mayfield, who went back to looking like an MVP candidate to nothing 2 weeks ago. And even Geno Smith didn't light it up, and he's leading the league in yards, like you just said, Nate. So got to be excited about the Broncos-Raiders matchups.
That's right. Hey, so Liv, before we let you get out of here, how was your trip? Who'd you guys interview? How did it
Fabulous. We had Amon-Ra St. Brown on the pod this week, which was super cool because obviously we got to talk about Jared Goff and how great he played in the Monday Night Football game, and talked a little bit about the culture over in Detroit and how things have been going for him. So super cool, super fun interview. I didn't realize how cool he is. He's got a lot of fun facts. If you watch the Receiver Show, you'd know he's bilingual. He's got a really cool family dynamic. So it was cool to have him on. It was more than that. It was cool to hear about who Jared Goff is outside of the perfect game. He didn't get the game ball, which we thought was funny. We had to ask him about that. Actually, Dan Campbell gave out 2 game balls and not one of them went to Goff, which I find hilarious because he had a perfect performance. But
yeah, and he caught a touchdown pass that Amon-Ra threw. That had to be fun all the way around.
Crazy. Yeah, it was a cool interview. It was really fun. So now I'm headed back home, and I'll see you guys on Friday.
Cool. Well, as you take off, you're in San Jose. As you take off and you look down, you can see the house. You can see the house I grew up in from the airplane. I always see it and I say, "Bye, Mom. Bye, Mommy."
Tell your parents to stay in the front yard and wait for me to fly, and then I'll.
They'll be waving at you, Liv. All right.
Perfect.
All right. Get home safe. We'll see you in a couple days. Bye. All right, there she goes. Our very own Liv Moons hopping on from the airplane.
That's a first. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. It certainly is the first time it's ever happened with me doing a show. I'm not saying it hadn't happened ever, right? But that was pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. We've got a couple minutes left. And before we do, I just want to talk about Sean Payton a little bit and how he's going to approach this game. Because when I played for the Broncos, it was clear that the Raiders were not our friends. We didn't like them at all. But a lot of that was because of history between Mike Shanahan and the Raiders organization. Mike Shanahan was the head coach of the Raiders for about a year and a half, was fired in the middle of the season, did not get along with Al Davis at all. Al Davis wouldn't let him choose his own coaching staff. Al Davis staffed his defense with Al Davis guys and not Mike Shanahan guys. And so there was dissidence throughout. Al Davis wouldn't let Mike run certain offensive schemes because he didn't like it. Mike Shanahan, it was not his place. And he ended up getting fired in the middle of the season, and they had a kind of a money dispute for years after that. Anyway, Mike always made it clear to us that we were going to demolish the Raiders, and we always did. The Broncos have not been demolishing the Raiders for a long time here. 8 straight games the Broncos have lost to the Raiders or something like that. Nathaniel Hackett was asked about the rivalry, and he said, "What rivalry? I love everyone. I love the Raiders. I love the Chiefs. My dad coached for the Raiders, you know." And then Sean Payton, Sean Payton, you know, famously is asked about some of these streaks, and not my hump. Well, he's been here for 1 year now, and he's lost to the Raiders twice. It's his hump now, right? How does you envision Sean Payton approaching this game? Just another game, BK, or is he going to have something extra for the Raiders?
I think he might have something extra, but I think part of it is going to be, and he is going to be asked about this one way or another today and or Friday, but likely today. Now that he's a year into it, does he understand the rivalry a little more? Let's be fair. For it to be a rivalry, it does have to be a back and forth to some degree, right? It's just been a beat down. Same with what it was with the Chiefs, which was even more embarrassing at 15 straight or whatever. But they played the Chiefs, who kept calling dumb plays, and the Broncos D played great in the game, the Thursday night game. And if you ask some people, had Russell Wilson played better in the game they won here, they would have rolled the Chiefs with some of the plays that were called and designed and that he didn't necessarily hit on, even though they still won that game and broke that streak. Well, I got to think that at least being there and seeing the hate at times between the fan bases or the dislike, that it will have now registered with Sean a little bit more. But it's going to be interesting because he talks about, you know, the Bucks. He knows what it's like to be hated by the Bucks, and he got to experience that again 2 weeks ago. But I think that if they can win this game, it refuels the rivalry a little bit more, because now you're like, okay, things are back to even.
And we're going to give our predictions on Friday, but we got a couple more minutes here. What do you think the Broncos' game plan is going to be offensively against this team? And the Raiders are you know, not a particularly good defense. They're kind of middle of the pack. What do you think the Broncos are going to lean on here at home against the Raiders on Sunday?
Yeah, and they're bottom third really in the major defensive metrics, right? Yards per play. And Carolina, with Andy Dalton making his first start there, lights it up. They scored 30-something points, but they're 24th in points per game and 24th in rushing. So I think and they're 17th in passing. Max Crosby missed his first game in forever the other day, so we got to keep an eye on him. And so if he can't go, plus we don't expect Davante Adams, then there's no excuse to lose this game at home on a 2-game win streak. One note that I saw from Eric Dalala, DenverBroncos.com, if Bo Nix wins, he becomes the first Broncos QB to win 3 straight games as a rookie ever. No rookie Broncos QB. Now, there haven't been a million rookies that have started a million games beyond, you know, the likes of John Elway and I guess we could go down the list, but there aren't too many. Jay didn't. I guess Jay. How many did he start for you that final or that first year?
Oh, Jay Cutler.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't win. We didn't fucking win any.
He didn't win any, right? So, but I'm saying he didn't start 16 games. He started 5 or whatever it was.
He started. Yeah, like we were.
But that being said, it still would be cool, and Bo Nix is going to keep doing stuff that rookies haven't done because of the way offenses have changed. You know, John Elway got benched as a rookie famously, and so there's no reason to think that Bo Nix is doing anything to get benched right now. I guess, you know, we know the future is going to hold. But talk about game plan. The Broncos don't want to tip their hand, but it's been very obvious Pat Surtain is going to travel with the team's best receiver. Well, if you don't have Davante Adams, what does that allow you to do, or how does that change things? Because their next 2 top playmakers are tight ends, I guess Jacoby Myers, Jacoby Myers, and then Brock Bowers.
And their running game is pretty abysmal.
Right. Zamir White is not scaring anyone, and the rest of that stable of backs.
Alexander Madison.
Yeah, Madison, who is going to catch the ball out of the backfield some. But are you better off when Pat Surtain can chase the very obvious number 1 receiver versus basically playing him on the left and Riley on the right, which is probably how you're going to do it most of the time with a right-handed quarterback? You know what I'm saying? Like, does that make things – it's not going to make the defense worse. I guess your DBs have to think less maybe, and you're maybe comboing coverage, but they're not going to tip their hand to us today or tomorrow when VJ talks, but it is obvious that if Devontae Adams isn't playing, the idea that you would send PS2 with everywhere Jacoby Myers goes seems crazy.
Yeah, and I don't think it changes a lot philosophically for VJ. He's still going to bring a ton of pressure. He's still going to disguise pressure. He's still going to, show that he's bringing 7 and he's going to bring 5 and then drop, an outside linebacker into coverage and bring safety blitzes. He's still just going to bring a ton of pressure and combinations from, rushing 4 to rushing 6 and 7. So I think that's ultimately what he's been doing. And I don't see that changing much. And it makes it an easier game plan, I believe, when you just keep the corners on the sides and they don't have to run back and forth, because there's a lot of calls and changes. If I am with Devontae on one side and he motions to the other side, well, I got to call this out and we got to adjust based on, the new strength and everything like that. So I think it makes it a little bit easier in the classroom and out on the field, just executing these calls. But I don't think philosophically it's going to change much at all for what the Broncos are trying to do defensively.
Well, yeah, and you think about it too with whoever the top guy is, but in this case, we'll call it Devontae Adams. When they motion, but they don't make it all the way across the formation, and you have a slot corner that was inside on the receiver there, and everything that goes into that. Not that they can't adjust and change their depth, but that is just one more wrinkle that if a Devontae Adams isn't playing, or if a Mike Evans isn't on the field, or a Garrett Wilson, then you're able to adjust. With the Chargers, they had Keenan Allen, they had Mike Williams, and now they don't. And we don't need to jump 2 weeks ahead, but Pat Surtain could have a little bit easier time, and maybe he'll get his chance to get his hands on a couple footballs, because we know that when you're barely getting the ball thrown your way, your opportunities are going to be pretty limited. But if you're in the same spot and you just get to adjust to what's going on, then maybe the quarterbacks will, because they don't have a favorite number one target, they have to kind of throw it where they want. Maybe a ball gets tipped. Maybe he just is able to get his hands on the football. But I think so that'll be interesting to see how they approach that. But offensively, I think you just try to run the football as much as you can and run it down their throat. You saw a semblance of a running game really the last 2 weeks with what Bidet was able to do in Tampa, and then obviously with what Javonte was able to do, especially in the second half. So I think you lean on the run game, you let Bo Nix run it when there's an opportunity to run it, because you're just not worried that this offense is going to score 30 on you. I'm not saying they can't, but they're not, they're not lighting the world up offensively, and so you're not scared the way you are when you play even an aging Aaron Rodgers or Baker Mayfield with those weapons, or certainly a Patrick Mahomes and what he's capable of doing. So I think you kind of keep it simple and just try to run the ball and play good defense and hope that Gardner Minshew isn't the gamer that we know he can be, but is kind of just the average quarterback that he is most times.
And maybe start off the game again by taking the ball and the first play of the game being a throw down the field to either Josh Reynolds or Cortland Sutton. I like that. And a lot of times, guys, when you throw, it opens up the run. It opens up the run because you back them off. You have a little bit of success throwing the ball, and then you can run the ball down their throat because they're worried about you throwing. And that's the kind of the cat and mouse game of play calling. You hit the body, they drop the guard. You hit the face, the guard. You keep throwing punches is the point. And we're going to keep throwing punches at you guys every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday now, right? It's going to be you and me on Wednesday. And maybe this can be a weekly thing where Liv chimes in from the airplane. You know what I mean? But that was unexpected. But we appreciate Liv joining us from the airplane. This has been Off Field. He's Brandon Krisztal. I'm Nate Jackson. I'm going to go try on one of those blouses back there. And we'll see you guys Friday. Talk to you later. We're out.